reaction video. This time we're going to look at Back Bay Train Collision 29 years later by Thunderbolt 1000 Siren Productions. So without further ado, here we go.
Thanks to those at GoFundMe for making videos like this one possible. More on that at the end of the video. December 11th, 1990. Amtrak Train 66, the Night Owl, departs Washington's Union Station, bound for Boston. The Night Owl was a part of Amtrak's overnight service on the Northeast Corridor, and was supposed to arrive at Boston the next morning on December 12th at 8:35 a.m. The train is led by an AEM-7, however at the time, electrification ended at New Haven, Connecticut. So once the train arrived in New Haven, the AEM-7 is swapped with two F-40PHs, numbered 272 and 366, to continue the journey to Boston. Behind the engines were a material handling car, a baggage car, 3 Amfleet coaches, a dining car, 2 sleepers, another baggage, and another material handling car.
That's a lot.
The train had a crew of 7 and 109 passengers on board.
That seemed like a
Engineer
few.
Willis E. Copeland and apprentice engineer Richard Abramson in the lead locomotive. Abramson is in the engineer seat driving the F-40s, but is doing so under the supervision of Copeland, who's been a railroad veteran since 1957 and became an engineer in 1969 as well as a road foreman. He joined Amtrak in 1976 and has been with them ever since. Abramson was hired by Amtrak in 1973 as a ticket clerk, but joined the engineer training program in early 1990. He's hoping for promotion sometime down the road, as he made 2 round trips between New Haven and Boston earlier in the month. Meanwhile, MBTA commuter train 906 was running on the Stoughton line, running from Stoughton to Boston, consisting of a cab car and 6 coaches with F40PH-2C 1073 pushing the train at the rear, with over 900 passengers and a crew of 5. It departs Ruggles Station at 8:20 a.m.
Why is there so little amount of people for a crew
Both
on a
trains
train?
began their approach to Back Bay Station, a scheduled stop for both trains. The Western Approach was a 3-track tunnel with the MBTA on track 1 and the Amtrak on track 2. The tracks are immediately adjacent to one another with no barriers between them. The speed limit for the approach was 30 miles an hour. The MBTA followed the speed limit, however the Amtrak wasn't. The train had started its braking at Ruggles Station, but as they entered the tunnel, Copeland began to realize that they weren't slowing down fast enough. They entered the tunnel at 76 miles an hour, more than twice the authorized speed.
Oh dear. It's bad as long as nobody train like goes by like
comes
looking
into
at.
view, Copeland reaches over to slam the emergency brakes, but it was already too little, too late to prevent the inevitable.
Oh no. It probably lasted longer than that.
The Amtrak locomotives tip over and slam into the MBTA train. MBTA 1073 is pinned against the support column of the tunnel, crushed, while the Amtrak locomotives lay battered on their side with severe frame damage. The collision caused the trains to jackknife and not only damage support columns, but create a hole in the middle of Dartmouth Street above. Rescuers immediately respond and arrive on the scene in less than a minute, since the accident occurred in downtown Boston. Rescuers feared many were dead or severely injured, but amazingly, not a single person was killed. But 453 people did sustain injuries, including the engineer and apprentice engineer of the Amtrak train. The total cost of the damages were over $14 million. Both Amtrak locomotives, the MBTA locomotive, 5 Amtrak coaches, and 1 MBTA coach were written off and scrapped. Back Bay was closed for 6 days as it took a very long time to clean up the mess.
Just 6 days?
But what could cause such a disaster? What were the Amtrak crew thinking? An investigation was launched by the NTSB, who suspected something wasn't right about the Amtrak crew. They found that Copeland, who was the engineer that was training the apprentice Abramson, was a bad role model. He was in the railroad business since 1957 and was promoted to engineer in 1969, as mentioned before. Surely such experience doesn't mean he's bad, right? Well, in 1979, just a couple years after being hired by Amtrak, he had ran several stop signals and at one point almost caused a train to plunge into an open drawbridge at Pelham Bay, New York, almost a repeat of the Newark Bay Bridge disaster in 1958. Only an automatic derail prevented disaster. After that incident, Copeland was fired, but was later rehired by Amtrak in 1983.
Why?
The data recorder inside the Amtrak train revealed the train was going beyond the speed limit, going over 100 miles an hour to make up for lost time between New Haven and Boston, as the train was delayed.
Copeland not
claimed
right.
He told Abramson to start braking at Ruggles Station, but the data recorder said otherwise. Even if the Night Owl did start braking at Ruggles, it was going way too fast and wouldn't slow down to a safe speed like 50 miles an hour before entering the curve. Simulations concluded that any speed over 60 miles an hour would have meant certain doom, which is exactly what happened here, as by the time the train started braking as it entered the tunnel, it was going 76 miles an hour before tipping over and colliding with the MBTA. To make matters worse, there was more to Copeland's bad record. Early in March of 1990, he was banned from running on Metro-North territory between New Haven and New Rochelle, New York, for his previous violations of operating rules, including his near disaster in '79. So to put it simply, he shouldn't even been on the Night Owl in the first place that night.
At all. And he was told to train somebody.
In the end, the NTSB pointed the finger at the Amtrak crew as Copeland was not supervising Abramson properly and that Abramson had a lack of experience as he was learning the New Haven to Boston route, like physical characteristics of the line, while learning how to operate the locomotive itself at the same time. Not a good way to learn how to drive. Also, locomotive engineers who were to supervise apprentices did not receive special training or instruction for that task. The NTSB raised particular concerns about Copeland serving in this role, given his service record, as pairing an inexperienced apprentice with an engineer with a very spotty record was just a recipe for disaster. Amtrak fired both Copeland and Abramson after the accident, and in 1992, 2 years later, Amtrak had installed automatic warning devices which would warn a train as it was approaching a curve too fast. Similar accidents like Back Bay, however, still occurred years later, such as the Frankfort Junction collision in 2015. But with positive train control being implemented on American railroads across the country, it's hopeful that 29 years later, such incidents never occur again. I offer so many different kinds of content on my channel. Trainwreck documentaries, Engines of SEPTA, Ennis and SEPTA in Norristown, and plenty of other railfan videos in the Philadelphia area. But with YouTube demonetizing most of my documentaries, it's hard to balance out video making with real life, as most of my earned money is spent on such things like food, gas, etc. But if you want to help make more videos like this possible,
okay, he's just going about his GoFundMe or his Patreon. So, that was an interesting story. I'm glad, a lot of them got injured, but I'm glad nobody died in that accident. Alright, let me know if you guys want me to react to another one like this. Until then, I'm Said Love, and I'll see you guys soon! Ooh, what's wrong with my throat?